What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Things You Don't Hear in Church podcast. If you're joining on video, it's clear we have a super exciting guest today.
Yep.
This is Christians Who Curse Sometimes. And man, these guys, or guy, I should say, this guy has a great Instagram, or girl. Well, I mean, they're going to speak. But has an amazing Instagram. If you guys aren't following them, make sure you go do that. Pause this channel or pause this episode right now. Go follow them on Instagram. Christians Who Curse Sometimes.
Your poops will literally never be the same. They'll be great forever.
No more reading of the shampoo bottles.
Nope.
You're going to be reading interactive stories with engaging questions, being part of community of Christians that are trying to, do this thing called Christianity together, and with a lot of empathy and a lot of grace. And so with that, I mean, you had a really fast growing channel, right? Like in 2 years, you've gone from a couple hundred to 130,000, maybe even more followers now.
Yeah, it was so crazy because, I started it and I was just like stalled at like the smallest numbers. Because when I made it, I never imagined anybody would even care. I assumed because of the name, pastors would never follow or share my content. Any Christians would really share my content. I just thought the name would hold people back. So it was just kind of my way to like vent. And I was like, I'll probably do this for a month or so. I'll get tired of it and then move on, which is actually what I did. I gave it up for like 4 or 5 months and then just slowly came back. And I had some posts that just kind of took off. And now here I am with this, with this beautiful 2-year-old Instagram page that I'm trying to keep up with.
Yeah, it's so awesome because in my mind, like part of the reason we started our podcast, Things You Don't Hear in Church, we called it that to attract people who maybe have maybe some beef with Christianity or the church because of maybe like the church not answering questions, right? So we've said this a number of times on our show, but like we'd be out and sharing the gospel and a lot of people were like, oh, I used to be Christian, but I had these questions that couldn't be answered. And we're like, man, these like are valid questions and like people need to give time to these questions because if the reason people are leaving the faith is because their questions aren't being answered and they don't feel like they're being heard, that's not okay. That's the opposite of what Jesus wants us to do, right? And so we kind of started with that intent of like, hey, we want to reach those who feel left out or unheard by the church. And I feel like your account also attracts maybe some of the same crowd because it's Christians Who Curse Sometimes. It's kind of less like, we were saying this before the show, but it's like this edgy thing where it's like, oh, like culturally Christians are supposed to be like up, or at least in my upbringing was the idea of Christians was be like goody two shoes, upright, innocent, never do anything wrong, and don't talk about it, and
which is funny because I'm like the least edgy person. Like anybody who knows me in real life would probably, I mean, I'm super secret about running this page. Like none of my friends or family know that I do it other than my wife really. But like if they found out, they would probably be shocked. Like I'm literally the most boring Midwestern dad that has nothing. I'm serious. Like outside of this and like my business, I'm like a stay-at-home dad and I just hang out with my wife.
That's
like
awesome.
I'm not some like big time mega church pastor with expensive shoes. Like I'm just some
that's what
guy.
You want us to think.
Right.
He's actually been on Preachers and Sneakers. We just haven't. We don't
Preachers
know.
and Sneakers.
No, but that's why it's so funny.
I also like to lie.
Because this page is like it's so much more edgy than I feel like I actually am in my life.
Yeah.
But I never get a chance to talk about it because I'm so anonymous and secretive. Like no one ever really talks to me, so I never really hear about the impact it's having or that even people really care. I just kind of post and it goes out into the world, and I know people discuss it because they kind of tell me, but it's just kind of a thing that I kind of post out and hope for the best that it's helping people.
Yeah. For people's perspectives, if you've never seen his page before or seen him on TikTok or anything like that, watch his stories on Instagram. He posts like a lot of very interactive stories on Instagram as well as on his timeline, where he'll go over just like polls mostly. He'll do like a poll and then post a lot of people's like responses to the polls and stuff like that on issues from LGBTQ stuff to deconstruction stuff to funny things, relationships, all that kind of stuff. There's a myriad of things he talks about, but it's all super, super interesting, like fascinating stuff that you wish you and your friends would talk about more openly, but you don't. Like things that you're excited, like the friend group was talking about when they're talking about it, but for like a large group of Christians, it's really awesome.
It's like those conversations you have with like just your like a few friends in your youth group and then you realize, oh, these are thoughts that I've been having for a while, and you are having these thoughts too. And that's like this realization where a bunch of Christians are like, oh, I'm not alone. And I think that's something that you've actually, I think I know you've talked about that a lot on your show with the, do you have a secret, like yesterday, and I think 2 days ago or yesterday, you did the series with, do you have a secret, and what's your secret? And
Yeah.
not to like expose people, but like, ooh, what's your fun secret? But to actually say like, hey, we're all struggling together. We all need to have more conversation. I think that's amazing, and you do it so well.
The thing that's so fascinating about the Christian culture is the topics we want to talk about the most are the ones that have the most shame attached, is what I've realized.
Mhm.
Just in like sheer numbers of the people who interact with, certain topics, like whenever we get into sex or stuff like that, like you don't hear a lot of very, very real open conversations on that topic in churches, even in small groups. Like people kind of get like, they get uncomfortable, they get weird talking about that stuff openly. But whenever you give people an opportunity to talk about it, they take it and they get very detailed and they want to share their opinion. But because we don't do that, unfortunately, people think they're alone in what they believe, and you can assume you're a minority because of that, which is an unhealthy way to think. Like the topic that always shocks me, I think it shocked me the first time I did it, but it always comes up the same as the topic of masturbation. The first time I did that poll, someone just kind of casually asked me, like, do you think this is right or wrong? And I posted it, and it was a 50-50 split right down the middle, like the act itself with nothing else. And it was 50-50. And when I posted the responses pretty evenly 50-50, people were shocked that the other side existed. And I was shocked that another side existed. Frankly, I thought it was going to be like 99 and 1%, but it's because it's never talked about. You're usually taught one thing and it's never discussed. So because of that, I like, it's so cool that I have the opportunity to kind of bring those things into light in a way that not many people can, because the Instagram and social media algorithm is all about patting you on the back with people who agree with what you're saying. So we get stuck in these echo chambers of people who agree with us. That my goal is to break that down as best as possible and expose people to perspectives that they're not used to seeing.
Yeah, and I think that's like such a needed thing. I was listening to the Joe Rogan Experience the other day with Ben Shapiro, and he was kind of talking about how like one of the most dangerous things that you can do is get yourself in an echo chamber, where you don't ever hear the other side, because that's how we grow, conversation. And that's what I feel like our culture is so bad at doing, is having conversation, not just even in Christianity. And in general, we're conditioned to like know our point, take our point, and plant our flag there. And any differing opinion has to be an attack, and that's what we're fed through media and news and all that stuff, and now politics and stuff like that.
And that's why I love giving people the opportunity. Like it's nice to be able to control the conversation, because it doesn't get out of hand. It's so easy for conversations and comment sections and things like that just to get out of hand so quickly. But in the way of, I kind of post an even number of both sides, but also allow people, if they disagree with it, to click the disagree button right below it. Like they kind of feel like their voice is still being heard. It still feels interactive. Even if they can't post that long, angry rant under it, they can still click, hey, I disagree with this, but also kind of see where they stand among like the Christian community. Not to say the majority is always right, but sometimes it's kind of just good to know where you stand in the bigger community.
Yeah, and you get a pulse for what everyone believes. That idea of saying something and having like posting something and have everyone freaking out in the comments and like aggressive towards each other. Kind of something that in a very micro scale I love to do on my Facebook. Like I'll just post like controversial theological questions because I have friends on both sides of the issues. And the problem is you
pour the gasoline, light the match, throw it in, and walk away.
Yeah, he literally logs out of Facebook afterwards, so he doesn't get the responses.
Like one time I had Facebook, and I still have Facebook, but I had the app, and I like posted a question because I was curious, and then later I was like, I'm spending too much time on social media, I gotta get off this, and I deleted all the social media apps off my phone. And like Derry, or maybe I turn off the notifications or something. Derry comes to me, he's like, dude, are you seeing your comments? I was like, comments? I was like, what did I do recently? And I was like, oh, I posted a really triggering question. I totally forgot.
Just hundreds of comments. It was crazy.
Wow.
And he's like, you have to read this. I like got on my computer and checked it out, and I was like, oh
yeah,
my gosh.
Whenever you post something, me and my friend Lindsay will always we'll post like the binoculars emoji and like eating popcorn emoji, because we're like just ready for We're ready for the comments.
Yeah, but here's the thing: everyone wanted to engage in those posts, and then actually your page really got me thinking like I should do more to do like cause unity. So I posted another thing a few days after all the drama, got like 61 comments on the topic of predestination, and I intentionally used a verse from Revelation that needed a lot more nuance than I gave it.
A lot more.
You knew
Like,
exactly what you were doing.
Yeah, I was like,
That's
I
just
wanna
more
see it.
gasoline right there.
But then like it has 61 comments and people going back and forth, long paragraphs, a lot of statements that had a bunch of underlying implicative opinions where I was like, wow, there's so much here that and then I felt bad. I was like, man, I should probably cause more constructive conversations. And so I posted another status that said, hey, like all you guys like responded recently, like here's another question, like what's something that's really helped you in your faith that you would like to pass on to someone else to help them? I got 2 comments.
Yeah.
I'm so disappointed in my followers.
Yeah.
Controversy.
Come on, guys.
Here's the controversy. People hate it. It's a good thing. Like outside of this, I'm a social media coach, and I tell people get so freaked out when like people are being negative or whatever, but that's good because conversation is a good thing. Like people so afraid, like the church in general gets very afraid to talk about controversial things because they know people are going to disagree, and it takes the right mindset to be ready for that.
Yes.
And but the answer is not the answer is not avoiding it. Like the answer should be, let's get in and figure out why is it controversial. Let's put all the puzzle pieces on the table and do our best to figure out how to put it together. We might not get to that final puzzle, but we can at least get one step closer towards unity. But ignoring it and only listening to one side is not the solution.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our a lot of people know this on our channel too. We work with a ministry called YWAM, and so our base leader, like with a bunch of YWAM bases, our leader who's in charge of everything is like so good at that, and he's so good at presenting, like talking about controversial topics in a way that's not triggering. Like in one of our staff conferences, we were talking about some pretty heavy things that like and everyone's kind of like on edge talking about it, but the way he like guided the whole conversation around, everyone left feeling like, okay, I feel at peace, I feel good, I'm moving forward, like we're confident.
Yeah.
And I think that's like such a good skill that I would love to personally grow in myself, but also like it's so needed, you know, especially in today's culture.
One of the hardest things that I really struggle with, it seems like such a simple thing to people who follow my page, but the thing that's so difficult is what I like to do for people who don't follow my page is I kind of present a question, post all the different responses all over the board, and then I try to wrap it up in the end with just some like pretty little bow at the end. And that pretty little bow in the end is the biggest stressor of my day, because
I bet,
a lot of times like I try to find the one piece of unity, like of the thousands of DMs I get on the topic, what's the one thing that nearly everybody mentioned, and like when it comes to whatever controversial topic it is. Like for instance, if I'm doing a topic of the biggest hot button one I do a lot is it okay to date non-Christians? That's a really tough question for a lot of people, but you know, you'll get people who say absolutely and people who say absolutely not. But to read through the messages and try to find that one thing that both sides are like, okay, yeah, we can at least agree on that. Like that's what I try to find. And it's some topics it's nearly impossible to find, and I have to sit and say something. And here I'll peel back the curtain a little bit. If I struggle to figure out what that thing is, the pretty little bow at the end is usually like a read your Bible kind of thing. It's like, hey, we need to embrace controversy, read your Bibles and ask questions. That's usually what I go to if I can't think of anything.
Right. That's a really good one though too, because it does drive people to consider the fact that what they believe about the Bible is not the right thing to believe about the Bible.
Yeah, it's really good. So I had this question for a while that I've wanted to ask.
Oh no.
Not like a long
What's
time.
your identity?
I know, but you're teasing it up. You're making me nervous.
Sorry. So you, on your page at least, there's a lot of people who aren't Christians who follow you, and they're like, you're one of the only channels that they'll follow because they love the conversations that you post, because it's such a real place for people to discuss Christianity. And I'm sure you've seen people like come to Christianity and also like leave Christianity with all the deconstruction questions that you post. Have you, like in your time of running this page and talking about that kind of thing, especially in a time where I think social media platforms that are about deconstruction are very popular. It's like the cool thing to start is like a deconstruction journey or channel or whatever. Have you yourself like come across any questions that have challenged you or anything like that? And if you don't want to talk about it, that's totally fine too.
Oh, no. I love this because the thing is, whenever I get a question that frustrates me or whatever, that makes me want to post it more. Like that's why I did. There was a time where I got a bunch, so I kind of embraced it, and I did a series called Unstuck for a couple days,
Yeah.
and I basically said, like, I said, send me every hard question you have, and a lot of them are the ones I would expect, but every once in a while I get one where I'm just like, gosh, I'm scared to answer. There are times where I'm like, I'm scared to post this because I'm afraid I'm going to hurt people's faith. But then I have to be confident and be like, listen, there are people who are like, because I'm not trained in ministry. So sometimes I get imposter syndrome and I say like, should I even post this? This isn't responsible. But I'm like, no, I have to tell myself the truth always prevails. Like to me, I fully believe that God is real and I believe in what the Bible says. And if I don't believe what the Bible says, then I should not post things because I'm trying to hide something. So when I see something that frustrates me, it energizes me to post it more and get answers for that person because I hate I hate that I can't think of what a possible answer could be. You know what I mean? When I see a question, usually I know what people are going to send. Like I get a good sense. Some people are just more eloquent with how they word it, but ones where I'm like, I have no idea what people are going to say. Those are the ones that really excite me now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and there's so many. Okay.
No, that with what you were saying about the deconstruction pages, I'm so fascinated by that, and I personally follow a lot of those because I love. Someone actually called me out on it, and I actually liked that they did that because they asked if my page was not a Christian page because I followed so many atheist and deconstruction pages, and I said no, I follow that for ideas. I want to know why these people are leaving, and I want to answer whether it's for myself or everybody else. I want to answer those questions. And you said something really interesting. You said, like, there's so many of them. They keep popping up, like in all these deconstruction pages, almost like the cool thing to do. Someone told me once, and this like buried its way into my head and lives in there rent free. It is so easy in life to hate things and be angry at things. It is less risky to hate something than to say you love something. If I say I hate a certain band, it's so dismissive of other people, and it's easy. No one can question my opinion on it. I just don't like them. It doesn't matter why I don't like them. I don't like it. But to say that you love something is vulnerable. It's putting yourself out there. It's inviting people's criticisms of why you love it, because do you approve of everything they say and do? Like there's more vulnerability and fear in coming forward and saying that you love something. So it's really interesting because I'd never ever want to say that it's easy to be a deconstructionist. I never want to say that, but it's just easy in life to hate things. It's easy to say you hate a movie. It's harder to say, you know what? A lot of people hate that movie, but I like it. And I don't care what other people say.
Yeah, especially when it seems like the narrative around you, or like maybe the thing that like all your friends are into, or maybe your school is like just is all saying like they like hate X, to say to go against the current, and and then be that outlier. No one likes to feel alone, and being alone itself is vulnerable. So even like along with the weight of saying you love something, responsibility that you have to say you love something, like we say we love Jesus, then we're kind of expected to defend why and give good reasons why.
Exactly.
And the expectation is that I could give you reasons that you also should love this thing, And so that's hard enough in itself. And then you add on top of that, like there's the risk of a negative reaction towards you, because you love it, where it's like you're swimming upstream in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really scary place to be, because I could ask you, what do you hate about the church? You could probably give me a bunch of things you don't like about the church in general. But when I ask like what things, right. But if I ask,
just kidding. Reality Honolulu has the best.
But if I ask you like genuinely, what do you love about the church? Like that's where it's a little more risky, because you've got to defend the church as a whole. It can be interpreted as that you love the church as a whole. You know what I mean? Just because of the culture we live in.
Yeah. And all that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'd be curious about like, how do you, maybe there hasn't been that big of a change, but like, has this page like had like impacted your relationship with God in like or a positive way? And like, how has that looked?
Yeah.
Dude, you have no idea the impact that this page has had on my life because A, I'm somebody who never wanted to ever work in ministry. And I don't mean that in
Mhm.
any sort of disrespectful way to the church. I never
Yeah.
felt called. I just loved volunteering more than anything else. I volunteer for the
Mm.
church. I never wanted to be paid by a church because
Mm.
I didn't like church politics. I was like, I don't
Mm.
want my creativity to be controlled by elders
Yeah.
or a
Yeah.
boss or something
That
like
makes
that.
sense.
I would much rather be the wild, uncontrollable volunteer and then have someone else take the heat when I do something wrong. And so I just never felt that call. So
Mm.
when this page kind of became what it was, like the whole story aspect of it happened completely by accident. It was not something I ever wanted to do. It was never something I tried to like get going. Like it was never an idea in my head. It was I had gotten reposted by a fairly large page and I had a bunch of new followers and I said, I'll do an AMA. I'll have people ask me
Mm.
questions. And
Mhm.
people started asking me theological questions. I was like, why
Mm.
on earth are they asking these to a meme page? I was so
Wow.
confused.
Yeah.
So and I remember exactly what the question was. Someone asked my feelings on smoking weed. And so I posted it and said, you know what? I'm not a pastor. And
Mm.
I think you guys should all answer it for this person. And I'll share what you guys say. And I posted, that. And then I started getting messages saying, like, can you do this topic next? Can you do this
Wow.
topic next?
Wow.
And I kept getting more. And I was like, there's a need for this that
Yeah.
somebody
Mhm.
needs to fill. And I don't see anybody else filling it. So I kind of, even though it made me super uncomfortable, I kind of embraced it because I'm the most moderate, middle of the road, non-controversial person. And the fact that like I've now made my life about embracing that is so
Hmm.
weird and shocking to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just kind of happened. And now it's everything I do. And I just sit and read controversy all day. So it's had such a big impact. But the biggest thing that I learned from all of this is I've learned that 98% of Christians are beautiful, rational people that are
Yeah.
open to opinions that are different from their own.
Mhm.
But a lot of people, including churches, would have you think different. And
Yeah.
there's a very, very small percentage on both sides of the spectrum that get very angry and hateful. But I've learned how small that percentage is.
Mm.
It's so
Mhm.
minuscule. The problem is they are loud and they get a lot of attention for the things
Yeah.
that they are saying because it grabs attention. It grabs my attention when I get a message and it buries
Yeah.
its way in my head and I let it bring me down sometimes. I'm not ashamed of
Mm.
that. Like I will sit and I'll fester over one message that said something hurtful when I just went through hundreds that were fine. And
Mhm.
when you kind of step back and look at the big picture, I realized like things are not as bad as people think they are. And that was the biggest kind of impact this page had on me.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in the last like maybe 2 years or so, probably around the time we've had this podcast, I've also like doing this different research for the podcast or just a different experience with people and learning and growing. I think I've come to realize not realize even in any capacity of even touching the surface on it, but like realize more for myself the lengths which God's grace extends to people.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of what it seems like that your show kind of exposes to, or your Instagram account exposes to, is the length of like well-meaning, or the amount of well-meaning Christians who are just trying to do this thing called life and Christianity and really honor God with their life and have honest struggles and not be ashamed about it. It's like, man, God loves all those people so
Yeah.
much,
Mhm.
and I think it's easy for people in full-time ministry to also feel that pressure, almost maybe even more, to be like perfect and put together.
Yeah.
And we live around with a community of like 50 full-time people in ministry. So like all of us are in full-time ministry. And so sometimes it feels like, oh my gosh, like if I'm supposed to be perfect as a Christian, now I'm supposed to be perfect as a full-time minister. And now I don't have any place where I'm not around people who are not in full-time ministry to, maybe be open.
Yeah,
We have to really
that is
fight
one
for
topic.
that.
That is one topic that I think I didn't realize how big of an issue it was until I started doing this page, was the issues that people who are in ministry have, the severe
Mhm.
loneliness, the depression,
Yeah.
the anxiety. Like I think I did this topic a couple weeks ago. I asked like people in ministry, like, do you struggle with loneliness? I think it was well over 90% said
Yeah, it's
yes.
crazy.
Yeah.
And there's so many little nuances that I learned that I feel like most people don't understand. Like, how on earth does a pastor get vulnerable about problems that they're having
Yeah.
with members of their church? They almost
Mhm.
can't in a
Mhm.
healthy way. And it's actually made me way more it's made me think differently of my pastors, that like I've even said to them, like, hey, if you ever need to vent, I'm a safe space. Whether or not they
Mhm.
take that, I just think I try to say those things more often, because I understand that a lot of times they just assume they're alone, or they have to find friendships outside of their community, which makes it even
Mhm.
harder, because then how do you integrate that friend into the rest of your life? Like, it's just
Yeah.
so weird, the nuances of that people struggle with between pastors' wives, worship
Oh
leaders,
yeah.
all that. And
Hmm.
like my mind just got blown seeing these real stories of people who send them in anonymously about what they go through, and it's heartbreaking. And
Hmm.
we need
Yeah.
to, especially as Christians, if there's any Christians out there listening to this, you have to start doing things that are kind for your pastor. I
Hmm.
don't care how
Mm.
small or how large of a gesture it is. If it's sending
Yeah.
them a gift card for a cup of coffee, or it's just doing something simple like that, the
Hmm.
impact that that has is so much bigger than you can ever conceptualize.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about this the other day. Like, there is this sort of mold where if you're a pastor or in ministry, you have like a person or a couple people around you that you kind of, hopefully that are around you. Sometimes you don't, but maybe you have some people around you who you're real with. But everybody
Mhm.
else, it's like you have this thing projected on you that you are supposed to be more perfect than
Yep.
everybody else. Even if you preach avidly against that, right? You still have an image in your mind subconsciously of, I'm supposed to be better than other people, or I'm supposed to be like morally better because I'm in this position of leadership. And I
Mhm.
think not that we need to normalize sin, but we need to normalize like that everybody sins, and that your pastor, like on Sunday, he sinned throughout the week. Like
Yep.
he did that, and he is a sinner just like you are. And he's not more holy than you are. He's just being sanctified just like you are. He's just the person with the mic that is good at explaining the Bible, or good at
Mhm.
shepherding a church, right?
Yep.
And like changing these walls that we have up, pretending like someone is so much better than we are, or the other way around.
But I mean, the thing is, just the basic like work culture like helps perpetuate that. Like when we look at our
Yeah.
bosses and people who hire us, like they have more responsibility. They're held to higher standards. So it makes sense that someone whose job it is to lead a church is held to a higher standard subconsciously. It's going to be
Right.
nearly impossible to get rid of that mindset. So I think like taking practical steps and just educating people, like, and normalizing, like inviting your pastor over without an agenda is
Yeah.
huge. I didn't
Yeah.
realize how many pastors have never been invited to anyone's house that didn't have an agenda. That's like
Yeah.
Wow.
sad to me, because like
Mm.
like I invite my pastor over and I don't think I have an agenda, but we like
Mm.
talk about things in church, and then now I'm overthinking like, oh my gosh, did he think we have an agenda? It's like
Yeah.
it's crazy how like learning little things like that have had just an impact on the way that I view the world.
Yeah. It's
Mhm.
got to be hard for those pastors too to even have real friendships, because you might in your back of your head be thinking, is there agenda behind this job that I have that never really stops? Like, me being a pastor is 24/7 in all of my friendships, in all these things. It kind of takes over your whole life. You can imagine
I
it'd be
have to
very
say
stressful.
I think it's tough for pastors, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I think it's even tougher for pastors' wives, because
Wow.
the issues that I hear from them, because they say like people use them as stepping stones to the
Wow.
pastor.
Oh,
Whether
Wow.
and I say wives, but I also mean I know that there are pastors' husbands out there.
Right.
Whether you agree
Yeah.
with women in ministry or not, pastors' husbands exist.
check our
Check out
last
last episode.
Check our
I
last
know,
episode.
But I don't like to act like they shouldn't exist. Like they do exist, so we need to reference
Yeah.
them when we talk about them. But
Yeah.
like hearing the stories that people literally just see them as a stepping stone for gossip, like thinking like, if I say it to her, she'll mention it to her husband, and then we'll get this done in the church. Like
Oh, yeah.
there's that distrust that they have, the spouses have, towards their relationships in church too, that it's almost more shielded, which can be more toxic. Like someone can text a pastor and say, hey, I want to meet with you to talk about this issue with the person in church. but people don't text the pastor's spouses that. They're a little more sneaky with it, from what I understand. And that is almost more heartbreaking because there's no comfort in that. Like, you can't even have any semblance of a line of, what does this person want from me? They could just be using your friendship to have pull in the church in a more like non-official way.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah. I was, as soon as we started talking about that topic and stuff, I remember seeing your story and like seeing all the like replies from pastors' wives and stuff like that. And that's never been a thought in my mind ever, because, well, I don't want to be a pastor, fingers crossed. But also, like, I would never think that I would have a wife that would be a pastor's wife, but it might happen. I think God will maybe do that. But then I started thinking, like, oh my gosh, like, how do these people like have genuine friendships, and where do they go for that? Everyone needs that, and so, yeah, I think that's good. So anyone listening, let's try to treat our pastors and pastors' wives better.
Yeah, because the other thing people don't realize that happens in churches, happens at any job you're at, is disagreements. Like, people have the same goal at a job and they can disagree with how to get it done. But when that happens at the church leadership level, they don't have those people that they can go out with friends and vent about it. Like, they just don't have that. So unfortunately, they can stew in it, which can cause more issues just to their mental health. So even something as simple as just letting a pastor vent is just huge.
Yeah,
definitely.
That's awesome. Do you listen to Christian hip hop at all?
Not really. I mean, I'm just not a Christian music guy, because man, you're about to get me ranting. Christian media is just awful in a general sense. Like, when someone, like, if someone were to say, hey, I can't wait for you to hear this new Christian music, I never assume it's good. And I don't think many other Christians do either, because unfortunately in society, the Christian label means less than. And I think
which is crazy to think about.
Yep. Unfortunately, that goes for Christians in the workplace too. I've done a lot of creative jobs, and I have seen people assume because I'm a Christian, I'm less likely to take a risk creatively. And unfortunately, because there's truth behind it. When was the last time you watched a Christian movie that had a shocking ending? I don't know that I've ever seen one. You know what I mean? Like, where you're surprised by a big twist in the movie. I tell people there are only two actually good Christian like pieces of media, and I say VeggieTales is one of them. Those songs are catchy and the stories are written really well. And The Chosen, which I haven't seen, but I hear it's very good.
Christian Luke Skywalker.
Someone did correct me, and because I've said this on a lot of podcasts, and someone corrected me and said Prince of Egypt, and I will give them that too, because the music in that is killer. But
I think they got the animation ethnically right.
Yeah, but the fact that people have no reason to buy PureFlix, because none of it on there is like, there's nothing on there that people are dying to see. Like, we should be creating Christian media that is so good that people who aren't Christians are buying trials to see what's all the fuss about. And the fact that we're not is embarrassing as a community, I think.
Yeah, and I absolutely believe that that's a possibility. Like we have one guy who comes and teaches in one of our schools, and he talks about this exact topic. And he's like, guys, we have access, like literal access to the creator of the universe. There's no reason we can't be creative and do just as well or better than the non-Christian media out there.
Yeah. Awesome. And because I say, if somebody were to make a story that had biblical themes and ideas, it does not have to be rated G. Like, if someone were to make a word for word depiction of the Bible, it would likely be rated NC-17. And you would not want anybody under 18 or even anyone with any sort of struggle going to see it. It would be super violent, super sexual. But the fact that like those things are in there to teach people lessons. And I think like if you want to teach a beautiful lesson like about the 10 commandments, pick any commandment and make a movie about it, and you would really struggle to get that PG rating. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
I remember
No, I
But
was going to say, like, I had kind of a moment with my kids because they were watching VeggieTales, and the beautiful way I love how VeggieTales told the story of David and Bathsheba, because they did the King and the
yeah,
Duck, and it was
yeah,
a
Yeah.
rubber duck that he wanted, and the whole way they told it, and then you have that moment of, oh, it's not a duck that he wants in real
Yeah.
life. It's really not a duck.
yeah. I remember that
it-
realization first time I read the actual story when I was like systematically reading through the Bible, and I read that, and I was like, oh my
not a duck.
gosh.
but like
I was like shocked.
But Christian media can take those kind of themes and ideas from the Bible and make something that doesn't have the Christian label on it, but has
Yeah.
full Christian values in it, and
Yeah.
create something that brings people to Christ. I fully believe that.
Yeah, I think I've seen that start actually with Christian hip hop. And when we were younger, like me and Derry both 25. When we were younger, it was like the very beginnings. You had like, I think Tunnel Rats was out there at one point, but that was before my time. But you had like Lecrae and even when I was younger, I kind of thought like early Lecrae. I was like, I don't know if I want to listen to early Lecrae. But now these young guys that are coming out, and no shade to Lecrae, he's awesome, he's good, he's still making good music. But the younger guys in Christian rap realm are actually making bangers where like Derry will play something and I'm like, this is really good. And he's like, yeah, this is Christian. And I was like, what?
Yeah. The difference is that they're honest. Like
Yeah.
they're really honest in their music. And I think that's what Pureflix doesn't really do very well, is that like it's not real. Like I've never watched a Pureflix movie and been like, this is real life.
I've
Like,
never watched a Pure
people
Flix
don't
movie.
act like this. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's why if you think about the past, 30, 40 years, how many Christian songs have been so good that they crossed over into the mainstream? The two
Yeah.
that come to mind first are I Can Only Imagine. That crossed over. Shackles crossed over. And I
True, yeah.
can't, I mean, you guys can tell me if there's any other. Those are the two that come to my head right
What's
off
the
the
one
bat.
that was on the radio a ton it was like 2011 or 12? How to Save a Life
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
by the Fray.
I didn't know
but
they
that's
were
what I think of.
Christian. I thought that was.
But the fact that in 30, 40 years, we can't even fill one hand
Yeah.
with Christian songs that have been so quality that they've crossed over into the mainstream, like
Yeah.
Shackles, and I Can Only Imagine, like explicitly reference faith and God in them, and they crossed over because they're killer songs. Say what you want, they were successful songs. You don't have to like it. They were commercially successful. It's humiliating that we can't have that crosses over into the mainstream, because every other genre has that often, except Christian content.
Yeah, I remember the first time I read the book of Judges. So I was like, I grew up Christian and I like read the Bible, but never like too seriously. In high school, I assume this is actually like the majority of like Christian testimonies. So they grew up Christian, they didn't take it super seriously. They went to high school or college and were exposed to other parts of the like world and life. Maybe did, like in my case, I was like smoking and drinking and all that stuff, and then came back to Christ when I was like really depressed. I assume I've heard enough of testimonies that I think that that's like a pretty consistent,
It's pretty normal.
yeah, pretty normal like story for people. But yeah, I remember the first time after that, like, coming back and like really taking my faith seriously and like, all right, God, like if you're real, I'm gonna like do this thing and like be committed to it. I remember reading Judges and I was like, this is Game of Thrones. I was like, my gosh. I was like,
Literally Game of
there's
Thrones.
coups, there's assassinations,
Yeah.
there's political like powers in play.
Yeah.
Like one king was running for his life from an assassination, and a girl said, come hide in my tent. And he said, thank you, and went to sleep. And she stabbed him through the brain with a wooden peg.
Yeah.
I was like, this is so cool. I was like, how come no one ever told me this about the? I would
Well,
be more
people even like take away the fact that when David killed Goliath, he cut his head off after it was done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, well, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, and you can make something just as good as Lord of the Rings from like this tales of like
100%.
David's. Like, if there was a trilogy or a saga of David's life, and you followed David from a young boy to kingship to
truthful.
old man, that would be such a cool series.
Yeah.
And like that could be just as good as Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or Narnia. Well, Narnia.
Here's the cycle.
movies
Here's the cycle that needs to get broken when it comes to Christian media. I know Christian radio is probably the worst at this, but there's elements of it in every kind of aspect of Christian media. Is a lot of it is from donors. A lot of it comes from people who have money, and especially Christian radio. It's basically kept up by donations.
Yeah.
That's why everyone hates K-Love and Pledge Drive time.
Yeah.
But
All the donors
all
like the
aspects
same
of media have that.
seven songs.
The problem is the people who are donating tend to be older. The people who have money to
Right.
give tend to be that older generation that is less willing to take a risk. So
Mhm.
it's this cyclical problem of even the people giving money are like, no, we want to attract those 20-year-olds to this great Christian content, but they don't want to take a risk with it. It's my money. And if it gets too edgy, my money's out. I'm not giving you
Mhm.
guys any more money.
Yeah.
So they're like, do we go out of business and risk taking, do we take a risk and risk going out of business, or do we just
Right.
keep the donors
Yeah.
happy to keep money coming? It's an
Mhm.
awful cycle, but that's what a lot of churches struggle with too. Why would a
Yeah.
pastor get up there and take a risk and talk about something like sex when all the old people will get offended and walk away with all their
Mhm.
money in their pocket, and then all of a sudden we don't have a church anymore? It's not
Mhm.
about like money itself, it's about keeping a church going, and media is the same way.
Yeah, and I think as far as that like idea of church and like them needing members to give to stay afloat, I understand that's how it's been. But when I read like Acts and I see that like one aspect, like we as Christians are held to being generous, and the generosity is for the benefit of everyone else, right?
Mhm.
Like it'd be super cool. Like I've seen churches do this where the church that actually supports me, they found out that there was a need in their congregation of a single mother who needed a new car. And so they gave the offering went specifically towards that. They were able to buy this woman a new car. Super amazing. But something that I really get amped about is thinking about like the idea of house churches. And if you have a house church, and maybe that house church is a part of a network of house churches that meet like corporately like once a month or something like that. So you can still feel like you're part of something a lot bigger than yourself. But if you do that, then you're not bound to a building, and then you're not bound to the bills of the building. You're bound to
Mhm.
people's houses and relationships. And how much more would these fruitful conversations happen in the safety of someone's living room with people that you trust, where
Yep.
there's no risk of like, oh, if I say this, then they might leave and I might not be able to get my
Yeah.
paycheck or pay the bills. And
Mhm.
I don't think that the majority of Christian ministry in America is fueled by money and like the general sense. I think there's a lot of good-hearted Christians out there and good-hearted pastors out there, but we can't ignore the fact that that definitely plays some part,
Yep.
or becomes a
Yeah.
temptation to at least.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely.
I think as more channels like yours like start to become popular, like yours is, the more people become honest with themselves and hear real honest conversations, the more like there's an open thirst for those kind of things of honesty, and the more you can never be satisfied again with like just being ignorant or not being honest anymore, right?
Mhm.
And so as more and more people get fed up with like hiding things and not being honest, like we've seen with a lot of like the deconstructionist movement, the more people get fed up with that, the more it will create a demand for actual real like good media within the Christian sphere, I think.
Yeah, but I think that goes for a lot of topics in the Christian church too. Like when it comes to mental health, I can tell
Yeah.
you my generation and your generation are sick of the prayed away mentality. Like
Yeah.
it's just like prayer is a beautiful, powerful thing, but
Yeah.
God blessed therapists with beautiful gifts to help people. And
Yep.
the fact that people can walk up to another Christian and say, you're struggling, well, pray it away. Like you wouldn't say that to someone with a broken leg, but
Right.
people
Some
with
people
mental, but there are people with severe mental health issues who all they hear from the church is pray it away. And I think I've seen the millennials and Gen Z are kind of taking a stand at this point saying like, nope, we're open about therapy. We're open about that. That's a positive thing. Where like my parents don't talk about that. Like they've been through therapy, but they never talk about it because it's in their culture. It's shameful to do that, where in our culture it's not. It's very common. I talk to friends all the time that about like my therapist and all that, because people see it as a good thing. So there is a shift happening in the church where, as a generation, we can say we're not okay with this anymore, and as long as it's biblical, the church can change. Unfortunately, when you have a culture clash of the older generation saying one thing and the younger generation saying another, it can build that tension. But frankly, eventually that older generation is not going to be around anymore. And then there's going to be another issue that comes up with the next generation that comes up. We have to be better prepared to have these conversations in healthy ways, because there will always be a dissonance. We just have to figure out what it is and how to handle it.
Yeah. And I think I'm pretty hopeful for, like, going back to Christian media. I'm pretty hopeful for Christian media, like making, and like channels like yours where they are making it easier to have these conversations. We see a lot of that coming up in the younger generations of Christianity. And I think and one of the risks is that, like, in anything, when it changes and adapts, there's always Satan, whatever you believe about him, he's always going to be trying to get in there in some regard, as we have more honest, open conversations, he might take an opportunity to try to get these, like, I would say, these not ungodly ideas in there, and under the guise of like hyper progressivism, right? Where it's like, it's good that we're progressing as a church, it's good that we're opening up about these topics, but then there's going to be people always who are more influenced from the enemy, and they're going to try to be, what do you say?
Sneak other stuff in there.
Yeah, sneak other stuff in there.
Yeah.
That's not a reason to say we don't go there. That's just to say, like, hey, let's have even more serious biblical doctrine then, and exegeting the scriptures with these conversations. It kind of makes the need for being serious about your faith even higher.
Yeah, I think you see that a lot in the deconstruction movement, where there's genuine things that need to be deconstructed about, like the traditions that people believe that aren't biblical, but then people will just kind of sneak in a lot of other stuff that they need to, like, stop believing that is biblical, doesn't need to be deconstructed necessarily.
Yeah,
but because you're going through all of it, you're willing to deconstruct all of it.
And the thing that I think is a really harmful mindset that our society promotes is we have such an all or nothing mentality, and that goes for so many things. Like, it goes for politics. Like, one of the most difficult things for people to say in the last election was, "Hey, I like a lot of things Biden says. I also like a lot of things Trump says." I don't know that I've heard a lot of people saying that, because our society has built it to be an all or nothing. And because of that, when people start having questions from the church, they don't say, you know what, I like these things about the church, I don't like these things, let me kind of embrace this a little bit and figure it out. They say, I don't like this part of it, so I'm out, bye. And then they kind of dismiss everything else, or they go the other way and say, like, you know what, I don't like these things, but I'm staying, so I'm committing, and I'm just going to say I love the church. So unfortunately, because of that, we need to encourage that, like, middle ground of, like, there are things I like, there are things I don't like, and I'm going to work hard to figure that out, instead of saying I'm in or I'm out.
And that's honest, right?
Yeah.
That's one of those. We got a little.
So I think, like, for you, like, you have your, like, fingers, I feel like, on the pulse of where the church is at, just because people are so honest with you because of all the anonymity that you offer them with these questions and responses. I feel like you will hear, like, the real responses from Christians. And it seems like from kind of all levels, like, from a lot of the things that I've read on your page, it seems like people that are pastors, from theologians to just the everyday layperson, have responded to your questions. So it seems like you get to encounter a lot of, like, what the actual church is in its entirety. What would you say? I know this is, like, a big question, but where would you say we're going as a church, right? We're going through all of these, like, media is changing, there's deconstruction, there's all this new stuff that's coming out within, like, how Christians are being honest about a lot of things. Where do you think, like, the church is going? Where is it heading? Like, what is it found out that's bad, that's leaving behind, and what is it adding on? How is it evolving? I guess I would ask.
I'm actually very encouraged by what I'm seeing. And I think people ask that question and they want, like, or they expect kind of a negative answer of, like, well, the church is just, gonna die someday. But I've seen a lot of evidence that gives me hope, that I try to focus on. And the thing that I've seen is, I don't see, in all the questions I ask every single day and the thousands of responses I get, I don't see a lot of division denominationally in how people answer the questions. I don't see people saying, I'm a Calvinist, thus this. I'm a Baptist, so I believe this. I see a lot of people taking ownership of their faith and saying, I believe in this. And I would say 99.9% of responses say that. Don't even mention a denomination. Not to say that denominations aren't important. I think they're extremely important, and for figuring out how you worship, finding out those specifics of what you believe. But I'm seeing this kind of place of all Christians are kind of saying, like, we want to be kind of this moderate place where we know people are different from us. We know people have different struggles. We know
Yeah.
people are different, and I want to learn from them. And granted, I have to also take into account that's the type of person my page attracts. So I can't say that that's all Christians, but the fact that my page is growing as quick as it is, and I'm seeing these people kind of coming in hungry for those conversations is extremely encouraging, because the fact that the page is the size that it is now, I actually thought was an impossibility with the things that I was doing. So to even see that is encouraging for the church moving forward. Like, I actually just recently, like this week, had a pastor message me and say his leadership team sits down with my stories and talks about like the ones from the week to kind of get a sense of the pulse of where Christians are at. And I was like, what?
Wow.
I was more shocked because I'm like, my little page, like I keep thinking like that's actually impacting a church. It just seems so weird to me. So to answer your question, I'm extremely encouraged, because I'm seeing, I told you before, I assumed that 70 or 80% of people are rational and the other people are crazy. I'm seeing way more rational people than irrational people who are just dismissive. It is such a small percentage of person that I see, and their opinions are just as valid as the next person. I want to hear them just as much as anybody else. But to see the anger and hate and that kind of a person just so small, minuscule, that like when I post something even super controversial, I can count on one hand how many people get angry with me is really encouraging. Really encouraging.
Just imagine if your Instagram page was a church, though. How many people are attending that church? Like, you do have a massive influence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah. And I think I've noticed that as well. I like, if you follow me on Twitter, which nobody does, I have 2 followers, but if someone were to follow me,
those 2 are loyal.
if someone were to follow me on Twitter, they wouldn't really know necessarily what I believe, because I follow so many different like people of different worldviews. Mostly because I love like apologetics. And so I follow a lot of atheists and agnostic philosophers. And I follow a lot of different apologists that are both like, I follow some like LDS apologists, and I follow some Catholic apologists, and mostly obviously Christian apologists. But I think a lot of them have some really good things to say. And more than anything that I've heard from a lot of these people within like Christian denominations is they're caring less and less about the actual divisions within the church, and more about like being unified within those within outside of those denominations, within the body of Christ, even among Catholics. Like, you can see that no matter what you believe about Catholics, the Pope is trying to be more inclusive of Christians, whereas before it was like, if you're a Christian, if you're a Protestant at least, like, you are not going to heaven. And over the years, it has progressively gone to be, no, now we're brothers and sisters. We just believe different things. And there's so many arguments with there. It can be a whole like 10 episode series, but
so many people.
But that's just what the Pope has been saying. So it's interesting to read these kind of things, where I think a couple of years ago, it was very much like almost we're different religions fighting each other within the denominations. We're arguing about all these different things. It's very divisive. And it seemed to me, at least on social media, that those arguments have died down a lot. And there's much, much more unity than there ever has been, that I've seen at least, among the different denominations towards the body of Christ, which it is encouraging. Yeah.
And I also just read something really with going to the people who grew up Christian and then left their faith. I was just reading this study about the reasons why. Like, if you do any sort of youth ministry, if you do any sort of young adult ministry, the 2 top reasons that people leave the church, the first is the question of evil. Why does a good God allow bad things to happen? That's almost the number. And I can tell you, I've had beautiful discussions with people who run deconstruction pages and atheist pages. That is probably the most common, that they say they lost their faith, is either something happened in their life or something that felt unfair, and they don't understand how a good God would do that. And the second thing is the reason they're leaving the church is that Christians are hypocrites. And if you work with youth in any way, or anybody who's left the faith, those are the 2 things you need to be able to talk to somebody about in a healthy way. And if you don't have a good answer for those, then you're not going to be able to even, you're not going to have any validity with them. And
Right.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
the second one a lot of times takes living it out. It's not giving them an answer, it's living it out, because no matter how
Yeah.
long we live, there's going to be Christian hypocrites out there, but you can be the one who's not a hypocrite in their life. And that
Right.
can have a bigger impact than the 99% of other people who aren't.
Yeah, and that problem of evil question, that even goes farther than youth. Like yesterday, today's Monday. Yeah, yesterday was the first time I was like volunteer with the kids at our church. Shout out Reality Honolulu, and we were talking about with the kids. Like one of the lessons was Jacob and Esau and like their whole thing, and then we're talking about it. And one of the girls goes, "Why did God like make Jacob deceive Esau if he's just gonna have them be friends again?"
Mm-hmm.
And I was, and she's 11, or no, she's like 10 years
Yeah.
old. I was like, that is such a good question from a 10-year-old. It's like, I was not mentally prepared for this.
I'm in
And then-
child mode right
I was
now.
like, I didn't know I was going to have a conversation about Reformed theology with the 10-year-old today. And
Yeah.
I was like, and I don't in any way want to undermine what her parents are telling her, because, the father's her spiritual authority, not me. I'm just a guy who's in charge of making sure you don't get lost,
Yeah.
And so I was like, trying to be as biblically integral as I could, while also like not saying things I don't believe in, while also trying to understand where she's coming from. And I would try to answer questions. And eventually she basically asked, why does God allow bad things to happen?
Right.
It's like something she basically asked, like touched on the problem of evil
Right.
from like a younger than a fifth grader. And I was
Right.
like, either this girl is really smart or I just don't give credits to young kids.
And you can't go into theodicy with a 10-year-old.
Right.
You can't go into these like complex, like philosophical ideas of how to answer the question.
I was like,
it's so much more difficult.
well, actually, there is the belief of the best possible world
Yeah.
with the idea of free will.
Yeah. You're going to all these things, like you can't do that.
So I was like, me and my girlfriend were both like watching the kids, and she like looked at me. She's like, "You want to take this one?" And I was like, "Sure."
Threw you under the bus. There you go.
Yeah, it's so funny.
And then later, I was like, "I'll go to the other table, make sure the kids are having fun over there."
Yeah.
But yeah, the problem of evil is such a good one. It's that's one of the biggest ones I've had with certain members of my family who aren't Christian. Is they're like, I believe a God possibly could exist, but I have problems with the idea that X, Y, Z, and it's usually the problem of evil. And what was the other one that you said was the hypocrite?
Well, the interesting thing about them is for Gen Z, it was the problem of evil was number one and hypocrites were number two. But millennials, it was flopped. So it was hypocrites were the number one reason and problem of evil was number two. So they're both, equally important, but it was a pretty big difference for millennials, because I think millennials, I'm a millennial, and we grew up in, all the new technology kind of a thing. So I think our parents and the older generation just weren't ready for the technology and the input that we were able to have and the access to information that we were able to have. So when they're not ready to answer a question, they look like a hypocrite. And
wow, that's a good insight. Yeah.
But now we're coming into a society where the parents, like I'm a parent of two young kids, and I have the internet and they're going to have the internet. So it's almost like we can be on equal footing now, because I know how to look up stuff just as good as they do. But our parents didn't have that. And if they didn't have a quick answer, they seem like they don't know what they're talking about and they're a hypocrite. So why would I believe what they tell me? And unfortunately, I don't want to blame technology, but I think there is an importance to it in faith.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So with the idea of hypocrite, if someone came to you and said like, hey, I want to become a Christian, but I have a problem with the fact that Christians are hypocrites and I don't want to be a hypocrite myself, like what do you think is the best way for a Christian to respond? Because there is an aspect where we can preach like love your neighbor, and the very next day I could wake up angry and like someone cuts me off in traffic and I'm losing my mind. And so it's not that, and that's not to say that's like, oh, well, Ethan, you're a hypocrite. It's just say, hey, like I'm in sanctification, so what do you suggest, or what would be your advice for someone to ask, or if asking like, hey, how can I be genuinely me without trying to feel like I'm failing if I'm not being perfect, but I don't want to be a hypocrite, but I will have times where I seem like a hypocrite?
I think it all boils down. It sounds like such a frustratingly simple answer, but we have to live it ourselves in order to make a difference in other people's lives. Because I'm sure you guys have had this experience, not to assume, but we all have that person in our life who's the closest thing to not a hypocrite that you look up to them, and it makes you want to be a better person. Like,
it's
you're like,
awful.
man, I wish I could just be that person. Like, we ultimately look to
Mhm.
Christ, but there are just those people in our lives who are like, how are they actually a good person? And like, they're actually like, they don't get angry when I say something mad at them. Like, I just want to live that out. And
Yeah.
people don't take into account that we can be that for somebody else. We can be that person. You obviously shouldn't be fully yourself about it, but you can be that hypocrite for someone else and give them hope. And that is contagious if we all just
Yeah.
kind of take the step. But the problem is, the hardest part about not being a hypocrite is being open about your struggles. That's
Yeah.
what I've seen on this page, is so many struggles are just covered in layers and layers of shame that like there, it feels almost insurmountable to be able to be open about what we struggle with. I can tell, like, I've done a bunch of workshops at this point about pornography through my page. The shame that is associated with that is so big and crazy, and it's so mind-numbing to me, because nearly every man has struggled with it in his life, yet no man wants to talk to any other man about it. Like, it's a logical fallacy almost. Like, we know everybody else has either deals with it now or has dealt with it, yet we feel alone and like we shouldn't tell them. It's so weird to bring logic to that. So like, taking those uncomfortable steps of being like, hey, I'm not a perfect person, here's what I struggle with, and being open about that is the first small step towards not looking like a hypocrite. Because a hypocrite is when your actions don't match up with your words. And unfortunately, if a Christian is trying to be perfect, you're going to fail. You can't have an image of perfection, because there is no way to be perfect. You will disappoint people if you are trying to look perfect to others.
You're gonna be a hypocrite 100% of the time.
Right.
Yep.
So would you say the thing is, hey, don't not be a hypocrite, because that's pretty much unavoidable, because you're always going to fail to live up to the perfect standard of holiness. That's why we have the Holy Spirit to help us get there, although we're still human, right? Would you say it's not that hypocrisy is like 100%, like you can't ever not have your actions and words match up, but it's the humility that comes along with it that maybe makes it okay for people when you say like, hey, like I know we preach like love your neighbor, but there's gonna be times where I lose my temper, and I wanted to like submit that to you and say, yes, like I know I'm wrong, and I want to change, and I'm trying to get there. And when they have that humility, do you think that's the differing factor?
Absolutely. I think when most people think about not being a hypocrite, their initial reaction is to try to bring themselves up, to try to be a better person, when in reality, not being a hypocrite means bringing yourself down and being more open and humble about what you're going through, and being open. So not being a hypocrite, people think, well, Christ is perfect, I'll take a step up and try to be more perfect. When in reality, sometimes we need to take a step back and be like, I just need to be more open about what I'm going through. That's why you see so much pain when these huge pastors have these big scandals, because they just were not humble. Like, they were not open. Like, if a pastor came forward and said, hey, I need to step down from the ministry for a little bit and get some healing, I really struggle with ABC sins, and I'll come back when I'm better. Like, if a pastor did that, I think a community would have so much more respect for him than someone who was perfect and had a scandal.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's good. So I think that's a really good. I didn't know it was the two were probably evil and hypocrisy. I could have probably guessed they were top 5, but I don't
It was
know
more of a
those two.
recent study. I'll send it to you guys after if you want to nerd out and read it. Like, I love reading like weird studies like that. I just find them so fascinating.
Do you know who it was by?
No, I have no idea. I'll look it up and send it to you guys after.
Because if it's not from a ministry that I absolutely agree with, then it's not real.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think it was from a ministry. It was from a giant study of Gen Z.
Wow.
Oh, so if it's not Christian, then I can't look at it.
If I would have guessed, I think I would have ordered it like just from the conversations that I have all the time. I think I would have ordered it like church abuse / hypocrisy, and then I would have said the problem of evil, and then the philosophy of divine hiddenness, or AKA the question of like, what about those who never hear going to hell and stuff like that.
Okay,
Probably.
I did
Just from the questions I've had.
I did find the study. It is from Barna, and
Oh,
I'm
okay.
I'm gonna go through. Here are the top. Was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? The top 7 issues of it says non-Christian barriers to faith is what they called it. The first one is problem of evil. Second is hypocrites. Third is I believe science refutes too much of the Bible.
Interesting.
Fourth is I don't believe in fairy tales, which is just it's
a
dismissive.
non-answer.
But
yeah, yeah.
it's a non-answer, but the fact of the matter
Yeah.
is that's what's keeping people back
That's
from
what people
faith.
think
So
about
we
it.
have to
Yeah,
know
that's what
that.
they think.
Number 5 is there are too many injustices in the history of Christianity.
Fair.
Number
They got us there.
number 6 is I used to go to church, but it's just not important to me anymore.
Oh,
And
I
then
like the
That's
honesty.
honest.
Yeah, I like it.
Yep. And then number 7 is I had a bad experience at church / with a
Wow.
Christian, which I
Okay.
would have thought is much higher.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's number 7. So those are the top ones on their
Yeah,
study.
the science one to me, I always wonder about that when people say like, I'm like, why aren't you a Christian? Like, oh, I believe in science. Because science is just the definition of science is just
Science is
and I always
hand in
ask
hand
them-
with faith. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like I ask them like, what do you mean by science? Because the actual definition, unless I'm pretty sure I'm right here, but the actual definition is the study of what's created.
That's some humble thinking
Yeah.
right there. I'm pretty sure I'm right.
I'm pretty sure. I gotta say pretty sure because if I say this is the definition and then someone Googles the definition and I'm wrong, I'm gonna look like a
Right.
fool. So the pretty sure is a caveat to
I
say
can
I
find different
could be
definitions
wrong.
for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna Google
See,
the
I
Oxford
also have a
definition.
hard time with the science thing because that's what brought me back to faith when I was really struggling with my faith.
Yeah.
Was the base thing that I could never like delete from my mind was I was always stuck on the fact that it's a bigger logical leap to believe in chaos and that something came from
Right.
nothing than to believe that
Right.
there's a creator. Like something
Mhm.
cannot, it's a scientific principle that something cannot come from nothing or something can
Right.
come from nothing. So
Mm.
you have to take a lot, like to believe that there's a creator is actually more of a logical probability than chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Classic Frank Turek.
Yeah, yeah, and like one of my favorite examples, I think, who's that New Zealand guy who's like does the 10 Commandments and sometimes it's not the best way to do it.
I don't know.
Did it in your SOME? He always asks like, "Oh, do you think you're a good person? Well, have you read the 10 Commandments? Are you still a good person? Are you going to hell?" I don't think that's the greatest way sometimes because I think there's better ways.
YouTuber.
Yeah.
guy, evangelist.
Anyways, he has a bunch of books, but something that he talks about, he's like, "Hey, do you believe in God?" They're like, "No," and they're like, "Oh, what do you believe in?" Like evolution, and then he just says like, "Okay, like if you take ink, paper, glue, and cardboard, and shake it all together for millions of years, are you ever going to come up with a picture book?" And everyone's like, "Well, no," and he's like, "Okay, so how can this world that's infinitely more complex in this universe, like just come from an explosion over and just like dust floating around essentially for
Mhm.
millions of years or billions of years?" And that's kind of like something that I've used where it's like, or you look at talk to people like, "Hey, look at this building. Like this building clearly had design and input into it. Trees are far more complex than buildings,
Mhm.
organic things." And so it's always a fun conversation to have. And there's ways to have it where people don't feel
Ray
like
comfort.
you're Ray comfort. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's ways to have it where people don't feel like you're attacking them. Like
Mhm.
I feel like that's a lot. I feel like there's and I'm especially passionate about this because I run our school of evangelism here in Honolulu. So this is like what I love training people in.
Big flex.
Big flex. I'm humble and due regard. There you go. But this is like something I'm passionate about, and I love helping people learn how to become more confident, I guess, in evangelism, because I think there's a underlying feeling that if I share my faith, it's going to be aggressive. So then maybe they're automatically more aggressive in sharing it. And like be like, well, like you're wrong because this. And it's like, well, no one's intentionally living their life wrong.
Yeah.
No one's like waking up every day and thinking like, unless you're like a murderer and you enjoy it, like no one wakes up and thinks I'm gonna intentionally choose to be wrong about a lot of things. And so if there's someone who doesn't believe in God, it's like they're not intentionally like they might hate God. So some people are out there, but for the by and large majority of the people, they just want
They're living out. Think is right.
They're living out their lived experience,
But when it comes to evangelism, it's that you brought that up because a while ago I did a topic and I asked former atheists what brought them to faith, and overwhelmingly, it was not somebody who like sat down and evangelized. It was them seeing them live their life in a non-hypocritical way. It was them seeing
Wow.
like
There we
it
go.
was them seeing like it was them coming and asking to be evangelized to, and not someone
Interesting.
Wow.
tossing a pamphlet at them and saying, let me know if you have questions. It was
Right.
they noticed something different about that person and said, what's different about you? Like, I like what you're doing in your church. Can I come along? It wasn't
Yeah.
someone shoving it down their throat. It was them asking the evangelist. And that
Yeah.
I thought was
Amen.
so fascinating. Like, you should be living your life that people are asking you about your faith, and you should, without the need for you to tell them.
Yeah. That's so good. And I remember, yeah, well, I'm not gonna share that story because I already had a flex of some sort.
flex
But
Bring it on. You're on a roll. Keep flexing.
I'm on a roll. All right, here we go. But yeah, when like we were talking before the show, I used to be a welder, and when I was in the welding field, I didn't swear really at all. One, because I was pretty new in my faith and I wasn't sure how I felt about it, and I just knew that I was like, this is not the best way to represent Jesus to these people. So I just didn't. And one of the guys walked up to me. He's like, "Are you a Christian?" And I was like, he was like, I hadn't known him for a few weeks. He's pretty new. I was like, yeah. Why? He's like, you don't swear. And I was like, all right. And he's like, is Doug a Christian? I was like, I don't know. I haven't talked to
Been
Doug
here for
about
2 weeks.
that.
I don't know.
No, I had been there for 2 years. This guy had been here for
yeah,
3 weeks. Yeah. And he's like, I think Doug's a Christian. He doesn't swear either. And I walked up to Doug. I was like, Doug, are you a Christian? And he's like, yeah, why? I was like, well, this guy said you don't swear. So I mean, that's why he found out I was a Christian, you know. And so
That's awesome.
That is interesting to say that, like, yeah, like, and what we talked about, like the second reason a lot of Gen Zers don't want to become Christians is the hypocrisy. And so it makes sense that once they see Christians being Christians, you know, and living that out, that they would be interested, like, oh wow, there's actually people who are doing this.
Yeah.
And
Like,
trying
what
their hardest.
I always tell people, like, what gives you the vibes that when you see somebody else that they're a Christian? What gives you those vibes? And then try to emulate that. Because if you know for sure that someone's a Christian based on how they're acting, there's something that is so unmistakably Christ-like about them that
Yeah,
we should be
absolutely.
trying to emulate too.
Absolutely.
It's exactly what Christ was, a servant, for me at least.
Mhm.
Like when I see someone being a servant, I'm like, wow, that person is other-centered. That's rare.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
to take the lowest of the positions possible, and like, it's just, that's when you were like, oh, that person's that.
Yeah,
You're taking like the worst job you
The
could
real deal.
have. Why are you doing that?
yeah.
Yep.
And you're like, and then they're excited, and they're not doing it with the grumbling attitude, like, fine, I'll take it because I'm a Christian. They're like, hey, I'll do it. Like, I'd love to take the worst position. And people are like, what is wrong with you?
Mhm.
Who are you? Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Cool.
Mhm.
Do you have any questions for us? I think I'm out of questions.
Oh my gosh, no, I have no idea. You guys put me on the spot. I have no idea what to ask you.
It's all
I
good.
mean, I just like to, I mean, I just want to bring up the fact that, you know, my page does matchmaking, and Derry was featured on my page,
Yeah.
I believe last
I was
month, which
wondering
I
if we
thought
were
was
gonna
so
talk
cool.
about
No, I just want to embarrass him a little bit. It's always fun to bring that up because it's one of my
Good luck.
favorite things that I do on my page, because legitimately it has brought up these beautiful relationships of people who have been together for a long time. And the fact that it's successful is still mind-blowing to me, because I did it once as a joke. Like, it was well over a year ago. Someone DM'd me and said, you should do a Christian Bachelor. And I said, oh my
Yeah, I
gosh,
remember that. Yeah.
that sounds
that,
so
yeah.
fun. So I just found this guy. I put a call out on my page, said, who wants to be a Christian Bachelor? And I did the whole thing, and like, people voted for who moved on. And then everybody just wanted more and more and more. So I started
That's
doing
awesome.
Being Single Sucks weekends, where I just featured
Yeah.
men and women. And then, you know, I turned it into Meat Market, where it's just men, because women, I'll give you guys some behind the scenes of this. I don't know if I've said this on other podcasts before, but when I do those single things, I feel so awful, because men are just not willing to like take a risk in any way, shape, or form. Like, if I post a woman up there, she'd be the most beautiful person in every way, personality wise, beautiful, whatever. I will get zero responses for her. Like, guys are just not willing to put it out there. But anytime I put a guy up there, I will get tons and tons of responses for this guy from all over the world. Like I'll have people say
Interesting.
like, I live in Kenya. Is it okay? Like, is he
Right.
willing to do long distance? Like women are just willing to put themselves out there more. So I've found that just featuring men is just more effective, because when I put women up there, I feel awful when I have to go to them and say, hey, I don't have any matches for you. Like that's just
Yeah.
like so heartbreaking and disheartening. But when I do it
Yeah.
with men, it's so like so many more women. Like Derry, like I'll pat him on the back a little bit. He got women from all over the world. So I had to ask him like, what are your limits? And he was like, I'd really love someone, you know, in Hawaii. And,
Yeah.
you know, I had a lot of girls in the mainland, but even people like I go through them and kind of take out the people who are out of your range. Like there were girls in like Switzerland who were like
girls way hotter than you.
well, he asked questions and I asked him like, what are your standards? Like, you know, what kind of person do you like? And I believe we did find him a match. I did send you ones that did not end up being matches, but he did get a match in there. So I'm anxious to see how that goes.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Earlier you said you were trying to embarrass Derry. I don't know if I've ever seen Derry embarrassed.
It's okay. He's getting quiet about this, so maybe he is embarrassed.
What's weird though is Derry also is like, he's like just a super understanding guy. Like like earlier you were talking about, like who's someone that you look up to and they just emulate Christ. Like I'm sure Derry's that for a lot of people, because like people have said very offensive things to him and he'll just say, hey, you probably shouldn't say that. That's not like a nice thing to say. And then like I've seen him get mad a few times because we like we're roommates, we do ministry together, we've been best friends for years. I've seen him mad a handful of times, and it's only ever at his phone when it's not working, and it's like not working for like an hour,
stupid.
you know. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, I've never, and I'm a little bit more of a intense person, so I get it. Like, someone will say an opinion, and I'll be like, I'm ready to debate right now, just for fun. Let's go. And he's just, and so it's just, I'm like, how do you not get mad about things? Like people cut me off in traffic, and I'm like, I'm about to ask for forgiveness in a few minutes.
I gotta repent. I don't know. I love being. No, I don't like being.
He's like, I just love being an inspiration people.
No, but but what I've actually found is that the guys who are willing to put themselves out there for things like this actually end up having cool experiences, end up like meeting people, like even if it doesn't work out. I think like most of the guys who, you know, I've featured have ended up like, yeah, it didn't work out, but you know what, it was really cool to meet her. Like they just have really good attitudes about it. And I really love that. But I did have one guy, I will not say his name, but he was in your group, Derry, like of the group of guys that I put out there.
Oh, really?
He got matched with a girl, and you know, you've seen how I do it. I kind of like send like both your information in kind of a group chat and say like, don't use this. I'm just kind of connecting you. So you guys, like, I never want to give each other's information. I want to keep it safe for the women too. So I did that for a guy and this girl he matched with. And an hour later, the girl messages me and goes like, this guy's crazy. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, he went through her friend list and DM'd every girl that he found attractive after she accepted his friend invite. So yeah, your face was my face.
That is crazy.
He sent me screenshots.
No,
but here's the worst part. He never answered her. She said like, hey, and he didn't say anything back. And then all of a sudden he DM'd all of her friends. So her friends were texting her saying, who's this guy? And because she was the friend in common. It was just a total mess. So I usually check in a week later and just kind of say like, hey, how are things going? And they usually say like, oh yeah, we had a first date, whatever. And the guy I sent it to that guy. He said, yeah, it didn't work out.
Whoa. So
and I didn't. But yeah, it was awful. I sent her this long apology and said like, please tell your friends I'm sorry. Like I clearly can't like spend a lot of time vetting these guys, but that's why I try to do it in the safest way possible. Like I didn't give him your name or anything. Like so I try to keep it. I mean, you saw how I do it, Derry. I send you just their picture and a little description, and you let me know if you'd like to get to know them. But yeah, man, that guy was nuts. I mean, I hope he's listening so he knows that I know, because I don't think he knows that.
What's the point in that though? Like, why not just like go on Instagram and find girls you're attracted to and DM them? Why do they have to be friends with someone?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
and it was actually surprising to me because he had a very like,
maybe he does that.
He seemed like a good guy, but I'm sure women are probably listening to this, rolling their eyes and being like, well, duh, of course he's like,
man, our pigs.
Exactly.
So it'd be really interesting. Like, I know you guys have you have a website right now, you have a Discord, if I believe, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, the Discord is me, but it isn't me. I just don't participate in Discord. Somebody came
Right.
to me and said I should have one. And
Oh,
then
right.
when they told me what it was, I said, yeah, it sounds like I should. So it's kind of its like own thing that has my
Okay.
name on it that like people who follow the page run. But
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the only thing I really don't have my hand in, that I fully trust the people who are running it.
Okay, cool. And then you have like, do you have a Reddit group, a subreddit?
Yes, that's run by someone, but I don't know how often it's updated. I
Okay,
like
yeah.
I have to keep my priorities in line, and I can't
Yeah,
Of
like
course.
I
absolutely.
do so much, and like I know we need a Reddit, we need like a Discord is a good thing to have, but
We
I
need a
trust
dating
other
app.
people
We need
with
a
those.
Christians who curse sometimes dating app.
Dude, I already do that. I already do that once a month with this page.
Exactly. But if you had the whole app just to have a bunch of all
Do
your
it for you.
followers.
Dude, I've actually
Always so funny.
considered, I've actually, one thing I've considered, but I need to figure out how to do it safely, is the one thing people like always ask me about is if they're moving, they want to be able to make a friend, like, in
Yeah.
their new
Oh,
city or
right,
something
yeah.
like that. So I
Yeah.
do
If
Friend
you're in
Finder.
Honolulu, come here. We want to be your friend.
Yeah.
So I do Friend Finder every once in a while, but I've actually
Hmm.
considered building a part of my website to connect with people. But
interesting.
the only way I can think that it would ever be effective is if there was a human being behind it actually matching people, like saying like,
Yeah.
you seem like you have the same interests as this people, and you're in the same city. You guys should hang out, because any sort of algorithm is just not good. Like there needs to be kind of a human element of like safety behind it, of
Right, right.
like getting to know. So I'm trying to figure that out, because I'm all about connecting people. Like I want people to be connected in some real life way, and it's so hard to do safely in our culture now. That's like I get so
Right.
nervous with the dating stuff, like because of that story I just told. Like I never want people to hesitate when I'm putting an opportunity out there. I don't want people to be worried like, well, what if this person's crazy? Like I want them to be able to trust Christians and put themselves out there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Oh, well, there.
Cool.
Right on.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
I've had a lot of fun this.
Yeah, we've been going for a bit.
Yeah. This has been awesome.
Yeah, super exciting. Before we wrap up, though, I don't know.
we got a question.
We got a question for you.
Yeah.
Oh no.
We meant to preface this. I thought about telling you about this in the beginning, so you had time to think. But it's more fun when it's on.
It's more fun when it's on the fly, yeah.
On the spot.
We ask everybody this if they like get interviewed on our show. Just to find
Yeah,
out
all our
about
guests
them.
get this question.
Yeah.
And so it's a little fun thing for us to talk about and our listeners to look forward to. Okay, you want to pose a question this time?
Yeah.
I've done
If
a couple.
you're locked in like a gladiator arena, right? Just you and one animal of your choosing, you get one melee weapon and you cannot leave the arena, and the animal is trying to kill you. What is the largest or most dangerous animal you think you could take, and with what melee weapon?
Oh my gosh. What a cool question.
Yeah. It's interesting. So far, just to give you some examples.
Yeah.
So far, we've had a giraffe, an alligator.
What was the weapon with the giraffe?
A
sword?
A sword. Yeah. An alligator was also a sword.
I said I said a hyena with a dagger.
With a dagger. Yeah.
See, but you're saying the largest animal that I think I could take?
Or like largest. It's
Slash
really like
most
most dangerous.
dangerous.
Yeah. But kind of.
Okay,
He
so
thinks
it's the
he could take a
largest-
small cat. He's
Yeah.
insane.
See, like if you're going for large, I'd say like, yeah, an elephant, because they're slow and I could just slowly kill it with like a dagger or
Interesting.
something like that.
Yeah.
Like that's what I would say is like, I feel like I could take down an elephant if I had like a big enough sword and enough time on my hands. Like you're not saying this thing is attacking me. You're just saying it's there.
No,
Well, you have- it is
you. Like,
attacking you.
It is
Oh, it
trying
is
to kill
attacking
you,
me.
and you're trying to kill it.
It's trying to punch you with
Okay.
its tusks if it's a.
Yeah.
Then I probably couldn't take on an elephant. Yeah, gosh, I'm such a wimp. I'd be like so freaked out. I mean, does a gun count? Can I have a gun? Oh,
No,
yeah,
that's the
weapon.
melee.
Only if you
Melee
pistol
weapon.
whip them.
Yeah.
Right.
You can hit them whether we want. Yeah.
I
Throw it
think
at 'em.
if I had like a really solid like katana, I could take on. I could probably take on like a cheetah. Maybe I feel like one good swipe,
Interesting.
and I could. Well, because
See,
here's
that's
the
what I
thing.
said
A
something- I
cheetah.
said something similar.
You know, fast
because-
those boys are known for being fast.
I think if it's running at me, I could like.
That's exactly what I said.
I could-
That's exactly what I said.
I could
Have you
duck
guys ever
and like.
watched Discovery Channel?
I could duck and swipe with the katana above my head, and it would just run into it.
Yeah.
Or I could just kind of flail it in front of me while it's running at
Yeah,
me.
just put them out there. It's gotta come straight towards you.
I don't have any skill, so I would just like be flailing it and hope that
Yeah.
it would run into it.
Either I overestimate cats' ability to hunt, or you guys overestimate your abilities and underestimate Cat's aggression.
Well, you're not in the
I
cast
de-
environment. You're in a gladiator ring.
I don't care.
Yeah.
That's going, and I don't know. I feel like I've watched so many nature documentaries. I'm like, I know how this thing's gonna attack me, and I know cheetahs can move super quickly, like left or right, and they don't have a lot of energy. They don't have a lot of stamina. They can't run fast for long, but they can turn directions like so quickly that they could just go around me and come from behind before I know what's happening.
Nah.
I desperately wish there was some way to prove this. I really do.
I'm gonna get rich and I'm gonna
I'm sure
find a
it's-
small cat for
I know
Derek.
there's emulators on the internet. You can probably do it somewhere.
That's
I'm
true.
I'm gonna become a millionaire. I'm gonna take Daria to exotic island that I've bought and with a cat that I've bought and give him a sword and I'm gonna say,
Prove it.
here we are. I'll fly you out
So
too.
Nice. A cheetah's a good answer. I think that's pretty
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Thank
It's
you.
just, I feel like of all the small cats, I would take a cheetah too because it's not as big as a tiger. You know, there's still.
Okay, wait. Now I want to ask you, of all the people you've interviewed, who gave the most overconfident, cocky answer, and what was it?
In my opinion,
So far, it's me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like, well, what kind of small cat do you think? You said small cat general. Are you thinking?
No, I like in the category of small cats. I said like jaguar, mountain lion. They're the same thing.
Yeah.
Just like those
Mountain lions
smaller
are
cats.
terrifying. I don't know. I think an alligator with a sword is pretty ambitious.
No, easy.
It's
Easier
Because don't
than
you learn in
that.
elementary school you can run away from them by going in a zigzag? Isn't that what they tell you to do? Just run in a
Is that what
zigzag.
Is that what they say? Maybe.
Yeah, because they can
But
run
she
really
said she's
fast.
gonna go
straight.
around it. She said she's
But
gonna
you gotta
go
kill it
around it
still.
and stab it in its back.
Okay.
Because the thing is, like, the risk I see with the alligator is that you might have the ability to run around and do all that stuff. The problem is it only needs to get you one time. Like you probably have to get it a couple times.
An alligator.
Yeah. It chomps your leg and does a death
True.
roll, you're dead.
Your
Instantly.
Oh,
leg's
yeah.
dead.
No, it's coming after you after it gets your leg.
And it's
You're
gonna
crawling
take a
away.
couple stabs to take down an alligator. Like
Yeah.
they've got thick skin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now
You've got to
if you
have
can
like
somehow,
you've got to have like the Kill Bill katana if you want to slice that thing in
Yeah.
half.
Yeah. Now there is an aspect to say if somehow you could get its mouth shut and step on it, because alligators have a very weak open.
Oh,
force.
that's right.
That's why they
Yeah.
tape their mouth shut and a little bit of tape.
Yeah.
So if somehow you can get on top of it, so maybe if you took like a dagger, I always use dagger or knife because I feel like you don't need a lot of distance for that, and you could like grab it and hold its mouth shut, but it would still probably roll to get out of that. You know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I just don't see it going well with alligators.
Yeah.
I feel like they have more. I think alligators have more of a will to kill and live than a cheetah or like. I think they're more
Oh,
insane.
I think so.
Like if
Oh,
there's
that's
an
true.
insanity,
Their
level,
brains are this big.
they're
They got
insane.
peanut brains.
That doesn't mean that means they're more insane.
Yeah, but that means they have just a primal instinct. That's all they
That's
need.
true,
Yeah.
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 I saw a video of this alligator bite another alligator's leg, death roll it off, and the alligator was just sitting there like no reaction. Like,
Like
"My
chill.
leg's gone."
I didn't need it
Whatever.
anyways.
Didn't even notice. Well, welcome to Things You Hear or You Don't Hear in Church podcast. We're talking about killing animals all the time with all our guests. Super humane.
Yeah. We should have someone from the Humane Society come on. They're like, I can't answer this question. Someone anti-gun and anti-animal or
Yeah.
super animal rights.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
that'd be great.
But yeah, thanks for coming on the show. For
Yeah.
anyone who's still listening, like, go check out Christians Who Curse Sometimes. You will not
Yeah.
be disappointed. Their content's hilarious. Some of the
Mhm.
best Christian memes you can get. And their stories are engaging and encouraging, uplifting, all that good stuff. And they have merch. You guys have merch, right?
Yes, we do.
Yes,
Yeah.
they do, yeah.
Yeah, so they got merch, so go buy something and then subscribe to follow them, follow us, and just
Yep.
keep up with all of us.
Yeah.
You want to say anything?
No, thanks for
All right.
listening, y'all.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it.
Thanks, Christian, to Chris sometimes.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys next week.